Curanderismo is a term that refers to several religious and folk healing modalities in the Hispanophone areas of North and South America. It comes from the verb curar, to heal, and the healers in this tradition are called curanderas and curanderos. It originates with Iberian and Latin American forms of Catholicism, indigenous American health ways, as well as African healing practices which came together in the context of Spain's colonization and evangelization of the Americas. My research, instead of focusing on the whole hemisphere, has really focused on the Mexican-American forms of curanderismo. And so I want to look now at the origins of this health tradition. First, we'll start with the Spanish Empire. The state of medicine at the time of the conquest was in no way more advanced in Spain and the Iberian Peninsula and all of Europe than it was anywhere in this Western Hemisphere among the indigenous peoples of the Americas. So we can kind of see where the Spaniards were when they arrived in terms of their healing tradition. They contributed to this combination. Like many Europeans, and for certain around the Mediterranean region, Spaniards typically considered that the medical understanding of the body was that it was a humoral system, an idea they had inherited from the Greeks and then later from Muslims who controlled most of the Mediterranean region at the time, including the Iberian Peninsula. And the humoral idea, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with, is simple. It was one of balance and equilibrium. There are 4 humors in the body, and if they were in balance, you were healthy, and if they weren't in balance, you were sick. And so if you were suffering from an illness, let's say that was a cold illness, you would be treated by some sort of hot medicine. Or if, let's say, you had too much blood in your body, too much hot and wet, you would be bloodlet. And these were the ways of restoring balance and equilibrium and health to the body. These medical professionals who focused on these humors oftentimes were also priests in the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church had plenty to say about healing as well. And in medieval Europe, in the Iberian Peninsula, the devotion to the saints was everything. Saints and their relics, saints and their power and their ability to intercede with God allowed for the healing of many different illnesses. And oftentimes a particular saint would be associated with a certain malady or body part. So for example, if you had an eye illness, perhaps you would do some sort of medical treatment to your eyes, some sort of salve or I don't know what. And then you would also pray to Santa Lucia, the saint, the patron of eyes. And that would be a way. And you can see one of the images I've put up here is an image of a text that was written in 1712, not too far from Arizona, in northern New Spain by a Jesuit called the Florilegio Medicinal. And throughout this book, the Jesuit who wrote it combines these medicinal treatments with saintly prayers. And those were kind of the 1-2 punch of healing as far as the Spaniards were concerned. But at the same time, there was popular medicine in Europe that also carried over when the Spanish came. Astrology, the zodiac, knowing when the stars were in a certain place to do certain things that were auspicious for your health. And of course, witchcraft and other forms of magic were also utterly commonplace among the Spanish when they arrived. They came in the early 16th century to the shores of what's now Mexico and Mesoamerica and encountered millions of people who had their own cosmologies and health ways. Some of them overlapped, some of them didn't, with what the Spanish had in mind in terms of religion and medicine and the human body. But one of the ways that I think the indigenous people were absolutely ahead of the Spanish was in a much, much more complete knowledge of American pharmacopoeia and herbal remedies, of the flora of this hemisphere. And so the Spanish were in a race to find out, what were the medicines that were going to work here, since it took them many years and generations to import and plant European pharmacopoeia and medicines. So the indigenous people had a very advanced knowledge in that. One difference, I think, that we could say is that in many Mesoamerican cultures, there was an idea that the body did not have one soul, as the Catholics believed, but there were different forces inside the body that have often been translated as soul. And for example, the Aztecs had a 3-part soul the tonali, which was in your head, the teolia in your heart, and the iyotl, which was in your liver. And they all had sort of different functions. And this also, it's not exactly like humors, not at all. But if you had trauma, if you had sickness, parts of your soul, or even general whole pieces of it, could leave your body, leaving you sick, disoriented, at a loss. And treatment then would often be to invite or coax that broken soul back into your body. Another aspect of Mesoamerican health ways that the Spanish encountered were medical specialists, sometimes referred to as shamans, who would enter trances either sort of through drumming or through hallucinogenic substances, enter a dream world where they would encounter different beings and forces and animals sometimes. And in that dream world, they would find wisdom to bring back to their patients and restore their health. And then finally, I think in a way that they did overlap with the Europeans, that they also had astrological understandings of the world. We can see here a picture from a codex from Mesoamerica that's quite similar to the European image of the zodiac that I showed you, of associating different parts of nature and of the cosmos with body parts and healing. And as I'm sure many of you also know, a very, very advanced understanding of the calendar and what times of the year were healthy for certain things. Now, a catalyst that brought together these two, if we want to call them ingredients of religious healing in the Americas, was colonial sickness and death. Here is an image from the Florentine Codex of people suffering and dying from smallpox. There was a rush on both sides, I'd say among the Spanish and among the Mesoamerican people, to find ways to heal bodies from the overwhelming genocidal levels of sickness and violence that were eliminating Mesoamerican populations. By some estimates, as many as 90% of people died in the first few decades of Spanish conquest. And so people were looking for answers, ways to bring whatever knowledge people had to restore health and bring those things together in any way that would be efficacious. And unfortunately, what often was the last resort for many was deathbed baptism into the Catholic faith, that even if they would not be healed here, they would find healing in salvation. Well, on a not very happy note, I want to fast forward a little bit, a few centuries. And in the intervening centuries, I can just say that there developed a complex hybrid healing practice that drew on both Catholic and indigenous understandings of the cosmos and understanding of the human body, and these things developed. They spread from the middle of Mexico north, even to where we are now in what, of course, used to be Mexico here in southern Arizona, and became part of what I've studied as Mexican-American Curanderismo.